Some women learn how to apply makeup from magazines. I learned how to use it to hide fear. Rain hammered against the windows of Rossi's Italian grill hard enough to make the neon sign outside flicker blue across the polished floor. Friday nights were always loud here. Expensive laughter. Wine glasses clinking. Rich men talking too loudly about deals they thought made them powerful. But none of them scared me anymore. Fear looked different when it came home with you. I adjusted the sleeve of my gray uniform for the 10th time that night, making sure the fading bruise near my wrist stayed hidden beneath the fabric. My hands trembled slightly as I balanced a tray of martinis above my shoulder, weaving through tables crowded with Manhattan's wealthy elite. The restaurant smelled like garlic, rainwater, and expensive cologne. Somewhere behind me, chefs shouted in Italian while jazz music drifted softly through hidden speakers overhead. Normal people probably thought it felt elegant. To me, it just felt exhausting. "Mommy," a tiny sleepy voice whispered from booth 7 near the back wall. My chest tightened instantly. Lily sat curled beneath my old cardigan, her blonde curls messy from sleeping against the booth cushion. 6 years old and already learning how to wait quietly while her mother worked double shifts. Guilt tasted bitter in my mouth every time I looked at her. "Go back to sleep, baby," I whispered gently, brushing hair from her forehead. "Only another hour." She nodded sleepily and hugged the stuffed rabbit I'd won for her last summer at Coney Island. The rabbit's ear was torn now. Like most things in our life. Worn but surviving. "Claire." Marco's sharp voice snapped behind me. "VIP table needs another bottle." I turned quickly, nearly colliding with a server carrying pasta plates. "Sorry." "Try focusing tonight," Marco muttered. "These people tip more in one dinner than we make in a week." VIP table. My stomach tightened before I even looked. 4 men sat beneath the dim amber lighting in the private corner section. Dark tailored suits. Expensive watches. The kind of men who carried silence like authority. But the one in the center felt different. Dangerous in a quieter way. Damien Moretti sat leaned slightly back in his chair, one hand resting near a crystal whiskey glass untouched for almost 20 minutes. Early 30s maybe. Dark hair swept neatly away from a face too calm to belong to someone harmless. His black suit fit like it had been stitched directly onto him. No flashy jewelry. No loud confidence. Just stillness. And somehow that felt worse. Men like Damien didn't need attention. They expected obedience naturally. The moment I approached the table, his dark eyes lifted toward me. Not toward my face first. Toward my wrist. Toward the part of my sleeve I'd been adjusting all night. My pulse stumbled. I poured the wine carefully, praying my shaking hands wouldn't betray me. One spill and Marco would lose his mind. "Anything else, sir?" I asked softly. Damien didn't answer immediately. He just studied me with an intensity that made the restaurant noise fade into distant static. Then his gaze shifted past me toward booth 7 where Lily slept curled beneath my cardigan. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Not pity. Something heavier. Colder. "Your daughter?" he asked finally. His voice was deep. Controlled. Smooth enough to sound gentle even when it wasn't. "Yes. She shouldn't be here this late." Shame crawled up my throat instantly. I couldn't get a babysitter tonight. One of the men beside him smirked slightly, but Damien never looked away from me. "And the bruise?" My breath caught. Every muscle in my body froze. Rain slammed harder against the windows behind me. Somewhere in the kitchen, a plate shattered loudly. But all I could hear was his voice repeating quietly in my head. "Who did that to you, Claire?" For one terrible second, I forgot how to breathe. Nobody had ever asked me that question directly before. Not like that. Not without pretending not to notice first. My fingers tightened around the wine bottle. I walked into a shelf at home, I lied automatically. The words tasted rehearsed because they were. Damien's expression did not change, but something colder settled behind his eyes. He knew I was lying. Men like him probably built entire empires on knowing when people lied. One of the other men at the table chuckled softly under his breath, but Damien silenced him with a single glance. No raised voice. No threat. Just silence sharp enough to cut through the restaurant noise. Be careful around shelves then, he said quietly. The way he said shelves made my skin prickle. He was not talking about furniture anymore. I nodded quickly and stepped away from the table. Before my shaking hands betrayed me completely. My pulse hammered painfully against my throat as I carried empty glasses back toward the kitchen. Marco grabbed my arm the second I stepped through the swinging doors. What did Moretti want? He whispered harshly. Nothing. You do not say nothing when Damien Moretti notices you. I frowned. Who is he exactly? Marco stared at me like I had asked who the president was. You seriously do not know? I shook my head slowly. Claire, that man owns half the city blocks south of Canal Street. His voice dropped lower. People disappear after crossing him. Cold unease crawled down my spine. I glanced back through the kitchen window toward the VIP section. Damien sat exactly where I left him, one hand resting near his whiskey glass while the other tapped slowly against the table. Calm. Patient. Dangerous. But what unsettled me most was not the fear. It was the fact that every few seconds his eyes drifted back toward Lily sleeping in the booth. Not possessive. Not inappropriate. Protective. Like he had already decided nobody in the room was allowed near us. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, exhaustion hit me so hard I almost cried right there beside the espresso machine. Because for the first time in months, someone had looked at me like they saw the fear I kept trying to hide. Mommy? Lily's sleepy voice pulled me back. I hurried from the kitchen and crouched beside the booth. Hey, baby. Her small blue eyes blinked up at me. Can we go home soon? Soon. She reached for my hand, then frowned slightly when she saw me flinch from the pressure against my bruised wrist. Children notice everything. Does it still hurt? She whispered. My chest cracked a little. Not anymore. Another lie. Lily leaned sleepily against me while I brushed her curls away from her forehead. Across the restaurant, I could feel Damien watching us again. The rain outside intensified, rattling hard against the windows while headlights streaked across the wet Manhattan streets beyond the glass. Then the front door opened. My entire body went rigid instantly. Ethan stepped inside smelling like rainwater and whiskey, his dark hoodie damp from the storm. His eyes found me immediately. That familiar knot of dread twisted violently in my stomach. He smiled when he saw Lily beside me. But there was nothing warm in that smile anymore. Claire, he called casually, loud enough to turn nearby heads. You have been ignoring my calls. Lily's tiny hand grabbed mine under the table. Fear moved through her instantly too. Children always know. I stood slowly, forcing my voice steady. You should not be here. Ethan started toward us anyway. And somewhere behind me, a chair scraped softly against marble floors. Damien Moretti had just stood up. The temperature in the restaurant changed the second Damien stood up. I felt it before I understood it. Conversations near the VIP section lowered. Waiters suddenly avoided eye contact. Even Marco disappeared into the kitchen like survival instinct had taken over his body. Ethan either did not notice or did not care. He kept walking toward me with that loose, careless swagger alcohol always gave him. There you are, he said, smiling too widely. I have been calling all night. Lily pressed herself tighter against my side. I could feel her tiny fingers trembling against my waist. Mommy, It is okay, baby, I whispered automatically, even though my pulse was crashing painfully against my ribs. Ethan stopped beside the booth and looked down at Lily. You keeping mommy company while she ignores me? His tone sounded playful to anyone else listening. But I knew better. Every word carried warning beneath it. You need to leave, I said quietly. Not until we talk. His eyes drifted toward my wrist where the sleeve had shifted slightly. His jaw tightened instantly. You covering those bruises now? Shame burned hot across my skin. Please, I whispered. Do not do this here. Do what? He asked loudly. Care about my girlfriend? Several diners glanced our way uncomfortably before looking back down at their plates. Nobody wanted involvement. People in this city master the art of pretending not to see things. Ethan reached for my arm suddenly, fingers wrapping around my wrist hard enough to make pain shoot toward my elbow. I gasped quietly. Lily immediately slid off the booth. Do not hurt my mommy. Her small voice cracked the air open. Ethan blinked once, almost annoyed by the interruption. Go sit down, Lily. No, the fear in her voice nearly broke me. Then another voice entered the silence behind us. Calm. Deep. Controlled. Take your hand off her. Ethan slowly turned. Damien Moretti stood only a few feet away now, black suit perfectly untouched despite the storm outside. Up close, he looked even more intimidating. Not because he was physically imposing, though he was. It was the stillness. The complete absence of panic in him. Like nothing in the world had surprised him in years. Ethan frowned. This does not concern you. Damien's dark eyes moved briefly toward my wrist trapped in Ethan's grip. Something dangerous flickered there for half a second. Then disappeared beneath cold control. You are standing in my restaurant frightening a child, Damien said quietly. Now it concerns me. My stomach dropped. My restaurant. Of course it was. Ethan laughed under his breath, but I felt his fingers loosen slightly against my skin. You know who I am? Damien asked softly. Ethan hesitated. Just enough for me to notice. Should I? Damien stepped closer. Not aggressive. Somehow that made it worse. Rainwater slid slowly down the restaurant windows behind him while amber light reflected sharply against his watch. People usually know before making mistakes around me. Silence swallowed the room again. Ethan released my wrist finally, though tension still rolled off him in waves. Claire, he said, never taking his eyes off Damien, you really bringing rich strangers into our business now? We are not together anymore, I said quietly. The words landed harder than I expected. Ethan's expression darkened instantly. That is cute, he muttered. You think you get to decide that alone? Lily hid behind my side completely now. Damien noticed immediately. Of course he did. Men like him noticed everything. His jaw tightened slightly before he looked back toward Ethan. You are upsetting the little girl. Ethan scoffed. And what are you going to do about it? Damien studied him for a long moment. Calm. Expressionless. Terrifyingly calm. Then he adjusted the cuff of his black suit slowly and said, I think you should leave while this conversation is still polite. Ethan stared at Damien for another long second before finally stepping backward. The tension inside the restaurant loosened slightly, like everyone had been holding their breath at once. But Ethan was not done. Men like him never left quietly when pride was wounded. He pointed toward me slowly, eyes dark and glossy from whiskey and anger. You are coming home with me tonight, Claire. My stomach twisted painfully. No, the word came out softer than I intended, but Lily squeezed my hand tighter the second. She heard it. Ethan laughed once under his breath. You think this guy is going to save you? Damien remained perfectly still beside us. Calm. Unreadable. That somehow terrified Ethan more than shouting ever could have. "I think," Damien said quietly, "you should leave before you embarrass yourself further." Ethan's jaw flexed hard. For one reckless second, I thought he might actually ignore the warning. Then one of Damien's men appeared near the front entrance. I had not even noticed him enter. Tall. Broad shoulders. Black suit. Cold eyes. Another appeared near the hallway leading toward the kitchen. Silent. Efficient. Suddenly Ethan was no longer standing inside a restaurant. He was standing inside someone else's territory. And for the first time all night, uncertainty flickered across his face. He looked at me again. "You are making a mistake." "No," I whispered. "I made that mistake 2 years ago." The words landed harder than I expected. Ethan's expression hardened instantly, but before he could answer, Damien took one small step forward. Not threatening. Not loud. Just enough. Ethan stared at him another second before finally backing toward the door. Rain and cold wind rushed briefly inside as he shoved the entrance open. "This is not over," he muttered. Damien's voice remained calm behind me. "For your sake, it should be." Then Ethan disappeared into the storm. Silence lingered afterward. Heavy. Uncomfortable. I realized my entire body was shaking now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. Lily wrapped both arms around my waist without speaking. Damien looked down at her carefully. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "You were brave tonight." Lily peeked up at him cautiously from behind me. "Mommy says brave means being scared and doing things anyway." Something shifted briefly in Damien's face. So quickly I almost imagined it. Pain maybe. Or memory. "Your mother is right," he said quietly. Then he looked back at me. "Does he come here often?" Shame crawled through my chest again. "Sometimes." "And the bruises?" I looked away instantly. Outside, thunder rolled low over Manhattan while rainwater streaked down the windows in silver rivers. I could still feel Ethan's fingers around my wrist. "Claire." My name sounded different in Damien's voice. Careful. Controlled. Dangerous for reasons I did not understand yet. "You do not have to lie to me." I swallowed hard. "You do not know me." "No," he said softly. "But I know fear when I see it." The honesty in his voice nearly undid me more than kindness would have. Because he was right. Fear had become part of me. Fear of bills. Fear of loud footsteps outside my apartment door. Fear of Lily hearing another argument through thin walls at night. Fear of choosing wrong again. Damien studied me silently for another moment before reaching inside his suit jacket. My pulse jumped instantly until he pulled out a simple black business card. No logo. No company name. Just a phone number embossed in silver. He placed it carefully on the table beside me. "If he comes near you again," he said quietly, "you call me." I stared at the card like it might explode. Why? For the first time all night, something close to emotion touched Damien Moretti's face. Cold anger. Controlled so tightly it almost looked elegant. Because men who frighten women in front of children disgust me. Then he glanced once more toward Lily before turning away. His men moved instantly with him, silent shadows falling into step as he walked back toward the VIP section. And somehow, watching Damien Moretti disappear into the amber light of the restaurant scared me even more than Ethan ever had. The business card sat in my coat pocket the entire ride home like it weighed 10 pounds instead of paper. I could feel it every time the subway rattled over old tracks beneath Manhattan. Lily slept against my shoulder while rainwater streaked down the train windows beside us, blurring the city lights into soft gold smears. Across from me, a man in a construction jacket snored quietly with his head tilted back. 2 teenagers laughed over something on a phone screen near the doors. Normal people living normal lives. I used to think I would have one too. Mommy? Lily murmured sleepily without opening her eyes. Yes, baby. That man was scary. My fingers tightened slightly around her small hand. Which man? The quiet one. I knew immediately she meant Damien. Not Ethan. Children sense danger differently than adults. They noticed silence more than shouting. Did he scare you? Lily thought about it for a moment. A little. Then softer, but I think he scared Ethan more. The honesty almost made me laugh despite the knot sitting painfully in my chest. We reached Queens close to 1 in the morning. Rain still drizzled lightly as I carried Lily up the narrow apartment stairs with one arm while balancing my work bag against my hip. The hallway smelled like old radiator heat and someone's burned dinner from downstairs. Home. Or something close enough to it. I unlocked the apartment carefully, trying not to wake Lily fully. The second the door opened, cold air brushed against my face. My stomach tightened instantly. The kitchen light was on. I knew for a fact I had turned it off before work. Slowly, I lowered Lily onto the couch beside her stuffed rabbit. Every instinct inside me screamed now. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant rain tapping against the fire escape outside. Too silent. Stay here, I whispered. Lily's sleepy eyes widened immediately. Mommy? Just stay here for 1 second. I stepped farther into the apartment carefully. The kitchen chairs were crooked. One drawer hung slightly open. My pulse began hammering so hard I could hear it. Then I saw it. A whiskey bottle sitting on my counter beside a handwritten note. My hands shook before I even picked it up. You embarrassed me tonight. The words blurred slightly as panic crashed through my chest. Beneath the note sat my spare apartment key. Ethan had never returned it after moving out. I had asked 3 times. Suddenly the walls felt too thin. The locks too weak. Lily too vulnerable. Mommy? Her frightened little voice nearly shattered me. I grabbed my phone immediately with trembling fingers. Call the police. That would be the normal thing. The safe thing. But deep down, I already knew how that conversation would go. They would ask if Ethan physically hurt me tonight. I would say no. They would ask if he threatened me directly. Again no. Then they would tell me to file paperwork and wait. Wait while fear slept beside my daughter every night. My eyes drifted toward the black business card still sticking slightly from my coat pocket. 1 number. No name. No logo. Just power wrapped in silence. I stared at it for a long moment while thunder rolled softly outside. This was insane. Men like Damien Moretti did not help women like me for free. Nothing in this city came without a price. But then Lily spoke again quietly from the couch. Is Ethan coming back? Fear cracked through her tiny voice so softly it almost broke me apart completely. My decision happened right there. Not because I trusted Damien. I did not. But because I trusted fear. And mine was telling me Ethan was not done yet. My hands trembled as I dialed the number. The line rang only once. Then Damien's calm voice answered immediately like he had been expecting my call all along. Tell me where you are, Claire. The silence after Damien answered unsettled me more than anything else that night. No surprise. No questions. Just calm control waiting on the other end of the line while my hands shook hard enough to drop the phone. Claire, he repeated softly. I swallowed painfully. He was inside my apartment. The words came out thin and breathless. Behind me, Lily curled tighter beneath the blanket on the couch, watching my face with wide frightened eyes. I heard movement on Damien's end. A door closing. Low voices somewhere in the background. Then immediate focus again. Are you hurt? No. Is your daughter safe? My chest tightened unexpectedly at the question. Not because of the words. Because he asked about Lily first. Yes. Listen to me carefully. His voice lowered slightly, becoming even calmer somehow. Lock your apartment door and do not open it for anyone except me. Fear crawled colder beneath my skin instantly. You are coming here. I already am. The line disconnected before I could answer. I stared at the phone for several seconds afterward while thunder rolled faintly beyond the apartment windows. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that before. Like panic was temporary. Like danger had rules he understood better than anyone else. 20 minutes later, headlights swept briefly across the apartment walls through the blinds outside. Black SUVs. More than one. My stomach dropped. Lily sat upright immediately beside me. Mommy, it is okay, I whispered, though I barely believed it myself. A knock came exactly 3 seconds later. Calm. Precise. Not impatient. I looked through the peephole first anyway. Damien stood alone outside my door wearing a dark charcoal coat over his black suit, rainwater still clinging lightly to his shoulders. 2 men waited farther down the hallway near the stairwell, silent and watchful. Even standing still, Damien carried the kind of presence that changed the air around him. I unlocked the door slowly. The second he stepped inside, his eyes moved. Across the apartment in one quick sweep. Open kitchen drawer. Crooked chair. Whiskey bottle on the counter. He missed nothing. Where is the note? He asked quietly. I handed it to him without speaking. His expression never changed while reading it, but something colder settled around him. The room suddenly felt several degrees lower. Lily stared at him silently from the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit tightly against her chest. Damien looked toward her immediately, and the ice in his expression softened just enough to notice. Hello, Lily. She hesitated before whispering, Hi. Did he scare you tonight? Lily nodded slowly. Damien crouched slightly then, lowering himself just enough not to tower over her. Strange. A man powerful enough to frighten entire rooms making himself smaller for a 6-year-old girl. That should not have happened, he said quietly. Lily studied him for a second before asking the question sitting in all our minds. Is he coming back? Damien looked at her steadily. No, not maybe. Not hopefully. Just no. Absolute certainty wrapped in one word. Something inside my chest loosened despite myself. Claire, he said, standing again. You and Lily are not staying here tonight. Alarm shot through me instantly. What? Your apartment is compromised. I cannot just leave. You can. Calm again. Controlled again. Like he had already decided. I crossed my arms tightly over myself. I do not even know you. Damien's dark eyes held mine for a long moment. You know enough. Rain tapped softly against the fire escape outside while distant sirens echoed somewhere deeper in Queens. He was right. I knew Ethan was escalating. I knew my daughter was afraid to sleep in her own home now. And worst of all, I knew part of me already trusted Damien Moretti more than I trusted the system that was supposed to protect women like me. Lily tugged lightly on my sleeve before whispering, Mommy. I do not want to stay here tonight. That decided it. Because I could survive fear. But I would never force my daughter to. The drive through Manhattan felt unreal. Rain rolled across the SUV windows while the city lights blurred gold and white beyond the glass like something distant and unreachable. Lily had fallen asleep beside me again within minutes, curled beneath a cashmere blanket one of Damien's men handed her without a word. I sat stiffly near the opposite door. Still wearing my waitress uniform and cheap sneakers inside a vehicle that probably cost more than everything I owned combined. Damien sat across from us in silence, one hand resting loosely against his knee while he answered occasional quiet phone calls in Italian. Even his voice sounded controlled in another language. Soft. Precise. Dangerous. No, pause. Handle it. Another pause. Quietly. Then silence again. I tried not to think about what quietly meant in his world. The SUV finally slowed behind massive iron gates overlooking the Hudson River nearly 40 minutes later. My breath caught slightly as they opened automatically. The estate beyond looked less like a home and more like something built to intimidate people before they even stepped inside. Stone walls. Security lights hidden among perfectly trimmed hedges. Black cars parked near the circular driveway like silent guards. Lily stirred sleepily against the blanket. "Mommy, where are we?" "Just somewhere safe tonight," I whispered, though the word safe felt strange here. Damien stepped out first when the SUV stopped, rain tapping softly against his dark coat while another man opened my door. I climbed out carefully, still half convinced this entire night had become some kind of stress dream. The mansion towered above us with warm amber light glowing through enormous windows. Beautiful. Cold. Untouchable. Lily reached for my hand immediately. Damien noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything. "Marco," he said quietly as we entered the foyer. A silver-haired man in a perfectly tailored navy suit appeared almost instantly. Older. Calm. The kind of person who had probably worked for Damien long enough to stop being surprised by anything. "Prepare the East guest rooms," Damien said. "And have Sophia bring something warm for the little girl to eat." Marco nodded once. Of course. Lily stared upward at the massive chandelier hanging above the marble floors while her wet sneakers squeaked softly with every step. "This place is huge," she whispered. Something close to amusement touched Damien's face for half a second. That is what happens when nobody tells architects no. The comment surprised me enough that I almost smiled. Almost. A woman in her late 50s appeared from the hallway carrying the kind of warmth the rest of the mansion lacked completely. Soft gray sweater. Dark hair pinned neatly back. Kind eyes. "You must be freezing," she said gently, kneeling slightly toward Lily. "I made hot chocolate." Lily looked immediately toward me for permission. Survival instinct. Always checking first. "It is okay," I whispered softly. Sophia smiled carefully at Lily before leading her toward the kitchen. The second Lily disappeared around the corner, silence settled heavily between Damien and me again. I crossed my arms tightly. "You really did not have to do this." Damien removed his coat slowly, handing it to Marco before answering. "Yes," he said calmly. "I did." "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. He looked at me then. Really looked. Like he was measuring every bruise I tried to hide beneath exhaustion and pride. Because little girls should not be afraid inside their own homes. The honesty in his voice unsettled me more than manipulation would have. I looked away first. Somewhere deeper in the mansion, I heard Lily laughing softly at something Sophia said. The sound hit me straight in the chest because I realized something horrible. That was the first time I had heard my daughter laugh all week. Damien watched my reaction carefully before speaking again. "You and Lily will stay here until I deal with Ethan." Fear tightened instantly beneath my ribs. What does that mean? His expression became unreadable again. Cold marble. Dark suits. Quiet danger wrapped in expensive fabric. "It means," Damien said softly, "he is not going to frighten your family anymore." I should have slept that night. The guest room alone was bigger than my entire apartment in Queens. Soft cream walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking rain-soaked gardens. A bed so large Lily disappeared beneath the blankets like a tiny sleeping ghost. But exhaustion and safety were not the same thing. My body was inside Damien Moretti's mansion. My mind was still standing in my apartment staring at Ethan's note on the kitchen counter. I sat quietly beside the window long after Lily fell asleep, watching rain slide down the glass while distant thunder rolled over the river. Somewhere below, the mansion remained awake despite the late hour. Footsteps echoed occasionally through long hallways. Low voices drifted faintly upward. Men moving quietly through a world built on power I did not understand. A soft knock came against the bedroom door close to 2 in the morning. My pulse jumped instantly. Claire. Sophia's gentle voice followed. May I come in? Relief loosened my chest slightly. Yes. She entered carrying a silver tray with tea and something that smelled faintly like honey. You have not slept, she observed carefully. I let out a tired laugh under my breath. Is it that obvious? Only to women who have survived difficult men. The comment startled me enough that I looked up immediately. Sophia smiled sadly while setting the tray beside me. You think you are the first woman to arrive in this house frightened? I wrapped my hands around the warm teacup slowly. What exactly is this place? Sophia considered the question carefully before answering. A fortress, she said quietly. Built by a man who learned very young that love and safety are not always the same thing. My eyes drifted unconsciously toward the door. Toward the hallway where Damien had disappeared hours earlier. He scares me. Sophia nodded once like she respected the honesty. Good. He should. The answer surprised me. But, she continued softly, he also protects the people he claims as his own more fiercely than anyone I have ever known. Claims. The word settled strangely in my chest. Why would someone like him care what happens to me? Sophia became quiet for a moment. Rain tapped softly against the windows while Lily shifted in her sleep behind us. Then finally she said, because Damien remembers what fear inside a home looks like. I frowned slightly. Sophia looked toward the fireplace before continuing. His father was not a kind man. Something cold moved quietly through my stomach. Damien was 13 when he first stepped between his mother and his father during an argument. Her voice remained calm, but sadness threaded softly beneath every word. After that night, he decided nobody would ever frighten the women he loved again. Silence settled heavily around us. Suddenly Damien's behavior made terrifying sense. The way he noticed bruises instantly. The way his anger sharpened whenever Lily looked afraid. The way he spoke about fear like he recognized it personally. People think men like Damien are born monsters, Sophia said quietly. Most of the time, they are simply boys who learn too early how cruel the world can become. Somewhere downstairs, a door closed heavily enough that both of us looked toward the hallway automatically. Sophia's expression shifted slightly. Alert now. What is it? I whispered. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed sharply outside the guest room. Not rushed. Controlled. The door opened a second later. Damien stood. They're still wearing the same black suit from earlier, though something about him looked different now. Colder somehow. Rainwater darkened the shoulders of his coat again like he had gone back outside at some point during the night. His dark eyes moved briefly toward sleeping Lily before settling on me. Ethan came looking for you again, he said quietly. My blood turned to ice. What? Damien's expression never changed. He will not be bothering you tonight. The calm certainty in his voice should have comforted me. Instead, for the first time since meeting Damien Moretti, I realized exactly how dangerous protecting me might become. Morning sunlight spilled across silk sheets I did not belong in. For one peaceful second, I forgot where I was. Then I heard Lily laughing somewhere downstairs, and reality returned all at once. The mansion no longer felt cold in daylight. Sunlight poured through towering windows onto polished marble floors while the smell of espresso and fresh bread drifted softly through the halls. Somewhere deeper inside the estate, classical piano music played quietly enough to feel almost accidental. It should have felt comforting. Instead, unease sat heavy beneath my ribs because peaceful places built by dangerous men always came with invisible rules. I found Lily in the kitchen sitting at the enormous marble island beside Sophia, chocolate syrup smeared across her tiny fingers while two chefs pretended not to notice. "Mommy," she grinned. "They made pancakes bigger than my face." Sophia smiled warmly over her coffee cup. "She has already charmed everyone downstairs." My chest tightened unexpectedly at the sight. Lily looked lighter here somehow. Less afraid. Like children could sense when walls were built to keep danger out instead of trapping it inside. Then Damien entered the kitchen. Conversation shifted instantly the moment he appeared. Not fear exactly. Awareness. Every person in the room noticed him the way people notice storms rolling across the ocean. He wore a dark charcoal sweater instead of a suit now, sleeves pushed slightly back to reveal strong forearms marked faintly with old scars. Somehow the casual clothes made him look even more dangerous. More real. His eyes found Lily first. "Good morning." "Sophia let me have whipped cream," Lily announced proudly. Damien glanced once toward Sophia. Then clearly the household rules are collapsing. A soft laugh escaped Lily instantly. I stared at him in surprise. The sound seemed to catch Damien off guard too because his expression softened for half a heartbeat before control settled back into place. He moved toward the espresso machine while Marco appeared quietly beside him holding a tablet. They spoke in low Italian near the windows for less than 30 seconds, but I noticed the exact moment Damien's mood changed. The air around him sharpened instantly. "Claire," he said calmly. My stomach tightened. What happened? He dismissed Marco with one look before answering. "Ethan did not go home last night." Cold dread spread slowly through my chest. "What does that mean?" Damien held my gaze steadily. "It means he spent the night trying to find out where you disappeared to." Lily looked up immediately from her pancakes, sensing the tension without understanding it fully. Damien noticed her reaction at once and softened his tone slightly. "You are safe here." The certainty in his voice wrapped around the room like steel. But fear still crawled beneath my skin because safety around Damien Moretti came with consequences I could not see yet. "I do not want trouble," I whispered. Something unreadable moved behind his dark eyes. "Trouble arrived long before I did, Claire." Silence settled between us. Heavy. Honest. Because he was right. Ethan had already poisoned our lives long before Damien stepped inside them. Damien moved closer then, stopping just beside the marble island. Not invading my space. Not touching me. Somehow that restraint affected me more than closeness would have. "Listen carefully," he said quietly. "Men like Ethan survive because women are taught to endure them quietly." His gaze flicked briefly toward the fading bruise near my wrist. "I do not believe in quiet endurance." The words hit something deep inside me I had spent years trying not to feel. Hope. Dangerous fragile hope. Before I could answer, Lily suddenly tugged lightly on Damien's sweater sleeve. "Are you staying for breakfast too?" Damien looked down at her small hand against the dark fabric like nobody had touched him gently in a very long time. Then slowly, carefully, he pulled out the chair beside her and sat down. "Apparently," he said softly, "I am." And watching the most feared man I had ever met cut strawberries into tiny pieces for my daughter with terrifying patience, I realized the most dangerous thing about Damien Moretti was not his power. It was how easily he was becoming part of our lives.